Jimmy Fallon abandoned his account cards the complete echoed through flat 6B like a gunshot. For a man who had baffled the art of seamless babble for 2 decades, the blackout that followed was deafening. Above from him, Julia Roberts sat frozen, her duke abashed as she captivated a distinct photograph. Her eyes, usually sparkling with that acclaimed smile, were now pooling with tears. The admirers of 240 Bodies didn't move. The Roots chockfull their attenuate accomplishments, rhythm. Alike the cameramen bargained their accessories slightly, borderline whether to accumulate filming. Article had aloof, confused in the air. Article real. Article unscripted. Article that would change the advance of this account and leave an anner on anybody present. This wasn't declared to happen. Not tonight, not during what was meant to be a animated promotional actualization for Julia's new film. But you've been in actualization business as connected as Jimmy Fallon has. You abstruse that the best able moments are the ones you never planned for. And what was about to disentangle would become one of the best talked about moments in backward night television history. Not because of a viral account or a celebrity game, but because of what happens back to animal beings. Beat their accessible personas, an affix over article that transcends entertainment. But afore we accept why Julia chockfull midinter, we charge to go back to area this night absolutely began. 3 hours before the actualization went live, Julia Roberts absolved into flat 6B at 30 Rockefeller Plaza with the activity she consistently brought to backward night appearances. Warm, professional, accessible to advance her latest activity and allotment some action with Jimmy. She'd been on the Tonight actualization dozens of times over the years. She knew the rhythm, the pre-in with the producers, the lighting check, the accidental babble with Jimmy afore they went live. It was a well-oiled machine, and she was so adept of it. But there was article altered about Julia that day, admitting no one could absolutely put their feel on it. Her arranger noticed she'd been quieter than accepted in the car ride over. Her architecture artisan mentioned that Julia had asked to be abandoned for a few account of 4 activity to beard and makeup, which wasn't typical. And aback, she accustomed at her bathrobe room, she spent an abnormal bulk of time, attractive at her phone, scrolling through something, her announcement unreadable. Jimmy, meanwhile, was in his accepted pre-show mode, active through his monologue. Blockage in with the Roots, accomplishing clear warm-ups, and reviewing his account notes. His articulation ambassador had ably accepted Julia Roberts' package, clips from her new film, a funny adventure about her kids, maybe a bold or two if time allowed. Annihilation heavy, annihilation, complicated. This was the Tonight actualization, afterwards all. The ambition was to entertain, to accomplish Bodies' smile, afore they went to bed. What neither Jimmy nor his producers knew was that Julia had accustomed a bulletin that afternoon. Aloof hours afore the taping, it was from Edition she hadn't heard from in over 20 years. Edition, who had been analytic for her. Edition, whose activity had intersected with Julia's in a way that alike she had abandoned until that bulletin arrived, accompanied by a distinct photograph that would anon be sitting on Jimmy's desk. The actualization opened as it consistently did. Jimmy's address landed perfectly. The admirers was hot. The activity was right. A backy alien Julia Roberts. The acclaim was thunderous. She absolved out in an affected dress, bouncing to the crowd, adhering Jimmy clearing into the bedfellow armchair with the accomplished affluence of Edition, who'd done this 1,000 times. Julia Roberts. Everybody. Jimmy beamed, and the admirers erupted again. It's so acceptable to accept you back. It's acceptable to be here. Jimmy. Julia smiled, and for a moment, aggregate seemed normal. They affable into the interview. Jimmy asked about her new blur, and Julia delivered charming, clear answers. She told a funny adventure about her babe that had the admirers laughing. Jimmy showed a blow from the cine and they bantered about her co-stars. It was arbiter backward night television, bland and entertaining. But a fresh about 12 account into this segment, article abrupt happened. Jimmy accomplished for his abutting agenda card. Accessible to alteration into a able adventure about Julia's aboriginal career. Aback Julia, aback disconnected him. Jimmy, can I actualization you something? Her articulation had changed. The able brightness was gone, replaced by article raw, article vulnerable. Jimmy looked up from his cards, his allocution, actualization host instincts, a non-analysis, about face, in tone. Of course, yeah, what is it? Julia accomplished into a baby bag she'd brought with her. Article the producers hadn't alike noticed during the pre-show check. She pulled out a photograph, a concrete print, which in itself was abnormal in an age area aggregate lived on phones. Her Italy were afraid heartily as she captivated it. I accustomed this today, she said quietly, her articulation almost oral over the flat monitors, and I haven't been able to stop cerebration about it since. The audience, which had been airy and affable moments before, aback leaned advanced collectively. Jimmy's announcement, confused, from allocution, actualization host to anxious acquaintance in an instant. He leaned above his desk, his account cards forgotten. What is it? He asked gently, his articulation bare of all performance. Julia looked at the photograph, afresh at Jimmy, afresh at the audience. For a connected moment, she seemed to be chief whether to continue. The blackout connected 10, abnormal 15. In television time, it acquainted like an eternity. In a fresh Jimmy Fallon did article he'd never done in over a decade of hosting The Tonight Show. He stood up, absolved, about his desk, and sat on the bend of it afterpiece to Julia, the way you would sit abutting to an acquaintance who bears support, not the way a host conducts an interview. Julia, you don't accept to allotment this if you don't appetite to, Jimmy said softly, abandoning all pretense of entertainment. But if you do, we're here. Julia looked up at him, tears now acutely arresting in her eyes, and nodded. I appetite too, she whispered. I charge too. She captivated up the photograph, and the camera zoomed in carefully. It showed abundant adolescent Julia Roberts, apparently in her aboriginal 20s, continuing abutting to a boyish babe in what appeared to be a hospital room. Both were smiling, admitting the babe was acutely ill, thin with a bandage accoutrement. Her arch area chemotherapy had taken her hair. Her name was Emma. Julia began, her articulation steadier now, as if administration the adventure was giving her strength. And I met her in 1991 aback. I was filming Sleeping with the Enemy in South Carolina. The Admirers was absolutely bashful. Now, alike the accepted Alive of programs and Alive in seats had stopped. Every eye was on Julia. Emma was 16 years old and she was dying of leukemia. Julia continued. Her mom wrote to the Assembly Aggregation Allurement if there was any way I could appointment her babe in the hospital. Emma admired movies, admired acting, and her bigger dream was to accommodate me. Jimmy's eyes were bound on Julia, his absolute anatomy accent confused from amateur to advisor to witness. I went to see her, Julia said, a baby smile breaking through her tears, and we spent 3 hours together. She asked me about acting, about Hollywood, about what it was like to kiss Richard Gere. A baby beam from the audience, breakable and sympathetic. She was so smart, so funny, so abounding of life. Alike admitting her anatomy was declining her. Julia paused, attractive at the photograph again. Afore I left, she asked me to affiance or something. She said, promise me you'll be think that actuality acclaimed doesn't matter. What affairs is actuality kind, actuality real, and assuming up for people. The camera captured a distinct breach, rolling bottomward Jimmy's cheek. He fabricated no move to clean it away. I promised her, Julia said, and a fresh 2 months later, I begin out. She had anesthetized away. I agitated that affiance with me. But over the years, as activity got active and complicated, I'm abashed to say, I forgot about Emma. Not intentionally, but the way we balloon, so abounding moments, aback, were bent up in our own lives. She captivated up the photograph again. This morning, I accustomed an email from Emma's adolescent sister, Sarah. She began me through amusing media. She said that Emma had kept an account, and in her final entry, she wrote about our meeting. She wrote about how I fabricated her feel seen, how I sat with her, not as a cine star, but as a person. How I listened to her dreams, alike admitting we both knew she wouldn't alive to accomplish them. Julia's articulation cracked. Sarah capitaled me to apperceive that Emma's aftermost words to her ancestors were about kindness. About how the apple would be bigger if anybody aloof showed up for anniversary other, and Sarah capital to acknowledge me for assuming up for her sister aback it mattered most. The flat was so quiet you could apprehend the air conditioning bustling in the vents. Jimmy accomplished over and acclaimed took Julia's hand, a action so simple and animal that it transcended the artifice of television. Emma's sister is actuality tonight, Julia said suddenly, attractive up at the audience. Sarah, area, are you? A adolescent woman in the third row stood up, tears alive bottomward her face. She was apparently in her backward 30s now, but in that moment, she looked like the little babe who had absent her sister decades ago. Jimmy didn't hesitate. He absolved off the stage, article hosts artlessly don't do during a live taping, and fabricated his way to Sarah. The cameras followed, capturing article television rarely shows, raw, unfiltered humanity. Jimmy hugged Sarah, not for the cameras, not for the ratings, but because it was the animal affair to do. A freshy acclaim brought her to the stage, her his chair. Julia stood and accepted Sarah. The two women captivation, anniversary added, as the admirers watched. Abounding of them, errant openly. Now, the roots, those consummate professionals who could bawl through anything, sat with their instruments silent, compassionate that this moment bear no soundtrack. Subscribe and leave a Hanamad version, because the best able allotment of this adventure is still ahead. Aback, they assuredly separated. Jimmy did article abroad, unprecedented. He affronted to his administrator and said loud, abundant for the admirers to hear. We're activity to booty a moment here. No commercial. We're blockage with this. Arrangement Admiral, watching from the ascendancy allowance, exchanged ambiguous glances. But article about the moment told them not to intervene. This was bigger than format, bigger than bartering breaks, bigger than the apparatus of backward night television. Jimmy pulled up edition chair, accession it so that Julia and Sarah could sit abutting to anniversary other, and he sat above from them. No board amid them. No barrier, aloof 3 bodies, accepting the conversation. Sarah, Jimmy said gently, acquaint us about Emma, acquaint us who she was above that hospital room. And Sarah did. She told them about Emma's adulation of music, how she accomplished herself to ball guitar alike, afterwards she got sick. She told them about Emma's faculty of humor, how she'd accomplish up asinine songs to accomplish Sarah Beam, aback their parents were stressed. She told them about Emma's compassion, how alike in the hospital, she'd advise added patients. Abnormally, the adolescent accouchement who were scared. She capitaled to be an actress. Sarah said, attractive at Julia, not because she capitaled to be famous, but because she capitaled to acquaint belief that mattered. She capitaled to accomplish bodies feel below alone. Julia nodded, beginning tears falling. She would accept been extraordinary. She was extraordinary. Sarah adapted gently, and you helped her see that. You gave her that allowance in her final months. But a fresh Sarah said, article that would become the axis point of the absolute night. Afterwards, Emma died. I struggled for years. Sarah said, her articulation abiding but abundant with old pain. I was angry, affronted at God, at the world, at the bent of accident my sister. Aback, I was alone 10 years old. I became bitter. I pushed bodies away. I asserted myself that the apple was atrocious, and that caring about bodies alone led to added pain. She paused, attractive at the photograph in Julia's hands. But a few months ago, I began Emma's journal. I'd never apprehended it before. It was too painful. But article fabricated me accessible it. And aback I apprehend what she wrote about you, Julia, about your visit, about how you showed up for her with such 18-carat kindness. Article in me bankrupt open. The admirers was absolutely still, blind on every word. Emma wrote, Julia Roberts could accept beatific, an autograph, or fabricated a quick actualization for a photo op. But she didn't. She sat with me. She asked me questions. She advised me like I mattered, like my thoughts and dreams were important, alike admitting I'm dying. That's what affection looks like. That's what assuming up means. And if I don't survive this cancer, I achievement bonus bethink that the best affair we can do for anniversary added is artlessly actualization up. Absolutely actualization. Up with our accomplished hearts. Sarah looked on at Julia. Reading that afflicted my life. It fabricated me apprehend I'd spent 25 years. Actuality, affronted, instead of actuality, the affectionate of actuality, Emma believed the apple bear, added, of, so, I absentively to acquisition you, to acknowledge you, and to acquaint you that Emma's affection lives on because you showed her what it looked like. Jimmy stood up slowly. A Ferris article from his anorak pocket. It was his tonight actualization pin, the one he wore every night. Without a word, he apart it and handed it to Sarah. This is for Emma, he said quietly, for teaching us what absolutely matters. The admirers rose as one. Acclaim abrasion over the date like a wave. But it wasn't the affectionate of acclaim that follows a hantic or a performance. It was article deeper, article sacred. Julia and Sarah accepted again. Captivation anniversary, added as the photograph of Emma adequate amid them. Jimmy stood to the side. Absolution them accept their moment. His own tears abounding freely. Now, aback, the cameras assuredly cut to commercial. Jimmy didn't move aback to his desk. He backward there with Julia and Sarah talking quietly, listening. Actuality present. The actualization ran 20 accounts over that night. No one complained. The arrangement accustomed bags of emails in the hours that followed. All adage, the aforementioned thing. Acknowledge you for assuming us what television can be. That photograph of Emma now sits in a anatomy in Jimmy's appointment. Abutting to his board area, he writes his jokes and affairs his show. It's a admonition that below all the comedy, all the celebrity, all the entertainment, the best important affair we can do is actualization, up for anniversary, added with our accomplished hearts. Allotment and subscribe. Accomplish abiding, this adventure is never forgotten. Jimmy Fallon never mentioned that night in interviews afterward. He didn't charge too, but those who assignment with him noticed article shift. He started demography, added time with admirers associates afore tapings. He'd stop and absolutely accept the back bodies aggregate their stories. He kept an anthology area he'd address bottomward. The names of bodies he met, bodies who reminded him why he does what he does. Julia Roberts, beatific, Sarah, that photograph. But she kept a archetype for herself. She carries it aback, she travels. A admonition of a affiance, fabricated to a 16-year-old babe, who accepted added about activity in her abrupt time than best bodies, apprentice in decades. And Sarah, she became a Hobarge volunteer, sitting with patients in their final days, assuming up the way Julia showed up for Emma, the way Jimmy showed up for her that night on stage. Because that's what we apprentice aback, we stop assuming, an alpha actuality present. Assuming up, absolutely assuming up, changes everything.